Night was falling over the city, enveloping the streets in a cloak of shadows and dim lights. Elena Gomez, a 35-year-old woman with a face marked by fatigue and worry, walked hurriedly along the deserted sidewalks. Her shift at the textile factory had just ended, and like every night, she rushed to get home to her 12-year-old daughter, Sophia. The cold October wind whipped her face, making her burrow even deeper into her worn coat. Elena shoved her hands into her pockets, feeling the emptiness where a pair of gloves she couldn't afford should be. Her footsteps echoed in the silence of the night, accompanied by the occasional roar of a distant car or the meow of a stray cat. As she walked, her mind wandered as always to her daily worries. The overdue rent, the bills piling up on the kitchen table, the need to buy new shoes for Sophia. The list seemed endless, and Elena felt that no matter how hard she worked, she never managed to get ahead. Just a little more, she told herself, quickening her pace. I just need to hold on a little longer and things will get better. It was the mantra she repeated every night, every morning, every time the weight of her situation threatened to crush her. Elena was a fighter. She had been since her husband abandoned them 5 years ago, leaving her alone with a 7-year-old girl and a mountain of debts. Since then, she had juggled poorly paid jobs, overtime, and personal deprivations to keep their little family of 2 afloat. As she turned a corner, Elena decided to take a shortcut through an alley she knew well. It wasn't the most pleasant route, but it would save her precious minutes. The alley was flanked by tall, old buildings with rusty fire escapes that cast strange shadows under the dim lighting. It was then that she saw it. At first, she thought it was just another pile of trash, so common in this part of the city. But there was something about its shape, its color, that caught her attention. Elena stopped, squinting to see better in the gloom. It was a suitcase, a black leather suitcase, seemingly expensive, abandoned next to a trash container. It looked out of place in that dirty, forgotten alley. Elena looked around, but the alley was deserted. Only the distant hum of traffic and the drip of a nearby pipe could be heard. Cautiously, she approached the suitcase. "Hello?" she called softly, though she didn't know why. "Is anyone there?" Silence was her only response. With her heart beating a little faster than normal, Elena crouched next to the suitcase. It had no visible tag, no name or address that could identify its owner. She touched it with her fingertips, almost expecting it to disappear or for someone to come out of the shadows to claim it. Nothing happened. With trembling hands, Elena grabbed the suitcase's zipper. Part of her mind was screaming at her to leave, that this was none of her business, that she could get into trouble. But another part, a part driven by years of need and desperation, urged her to open it. The zipper gave way with a soft click. Elena held her breath as she slowly opened the suitcase lid. What she saw inside left her breathless. Money. Piles and piles of money. Neatly stacked and arranged bundles of bills filled the suitcase to the brim. In the dim light of the alley, Elena could make out high-denomination bills. More money than she had ever seen in her life. More than she could earn in years of work at the factory. "It can't be," she whispered. With trembling hands, Elena remained paralyzed, unable to look away from the contents of the suitcase. Her mind was a whirlwind of contradictory thoughts and emotions, disbelief, fear, and a growing spark of hope and greed. With shaking fingers, she took one of the bundles of bills. Felt real. Smelled new. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a hallucination caused by fatigue. It was real. The sound of a distant siren startled her, making her drop the bundle of bills, which fell back into the suitcase. Elena looked around frantically, suddenly aware of how exposed she was in that alley. "What am I doing?" she asked herself aloud, panic growing in her chest. "This can't be legal. I have to get out of here." But when she tried to stand up, her legs wouldn't respond. The sight of all that money, of all the possibilities it represented, kept her nailed to the spot. Elena closed her eyes, trying to calm her agitated breathing and clear her thoughts. Images began to parade through her mind. Sophia with new shoes, smiling as she walked to school. Herself, rested and without dark circles under her eyes, not having to worry about the next shift. A home of their own, small but cozy, far from the dilapidated apartment they now rented. When she opened her eyes, her decision was made. With quick, decisive movements, Elena closed the suitcase and stood up. She looked around once more, making sure no one had seen her. The alley remained as empty and silent as before. "I'm sorry," she murmured, though she wasn't sure who she was apologizing to. "I need it more than you do." With one last nervous glance, Elena grabbed the suitcase and began to walk quickly towards the exit of the alley. The weight of the suitcase was considerable, but adrenaline gave her strength. Each step she took resonated in her ears like thunder, and she had the feeling that at any moment someone would shout, "Thief!" behind her back. But nobody shouted. Nobody stopped her. In a matter of minutes, Elena emerged from the alley onto a busier street, blending in with the few pedestrians still circulating at that hour. The way home had never seemed so long. Every person who passed by seemed to look at her with suspicion. Every police car she saw made her feel like her heart would stop. But little by little, block after block, Elena got closer to her building. When she finally reached the dilapidated apartment block where she lived, Elena felt like her legs would give out at any moment. The elevator was broken, as always, so she had to climb 4 floors by stairs, dragging the heavy suitcase. Upon reaching her apartment door, Elena paused for a moment. She considered turning around, going back down the stairs, and abandoning the suitcase where she had found it. But the memory of the unpaid bills, of Sophia's sad look every time she had to tell her they couldn't afford something, made her go on. With trembling hands, Elena opened the door and entered the small apartment. Silence greeted her. Sophia must already be asleep. Elena dragged the suitcase to her bedroom and hid it at the bottom of her closet, covering it with old blankets and clothes she no longer used. Only then, when the evidence of her act was hidden, did she allow herself to breathe deeply. She collapsed on the bed, her mind still trying to process what had just happened. Had she really done that? Had she stolen a suitcase full of money? "It's not stealing," she told herself softly. "It was abandoned. No one claimed it. It's like finding a treasure." But even as she said these words to herself, Elena knew she was lying. Someone had lost that suitcase. Someone would be looking for it. And that someone was probably not the type of person who would accidentally leave a fortune lying in an alley. The sound of soft footsteps pulled her from her thoughts. Her bedroom door opened slowly, and Sophia poked her head in. "Mom?" the girl asked, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "You're home late today." Elena sat up quickly, forcing a smile on her face. "Yes, honey. There was a problem at the factory and I had to stay a little longer." "Why are you awake so late?" Sophia entered the room and sat next to her mother on the bed. "I was waiting for you. I can't sleep well when you're not home." Elena's heart tightened at her words. How many nights had she come home late to find her daughter asleep over her textbooks, waiting for her? How many times had she had to choose between spending time with Sophia or taking an extra shift to be able to pay the bills? "I'm sorry, my love," Elena said, hugging her daughter. "I promise things will get better soon. Very soon." Sophia looked at her with those big, trusting eyes that always made Elena feel guilty for not being able to give her more. "Really? How do you know?" Elena hesitated for a moment. What could she say? That her mother had just stolen a suitcase full of money? That they were about to live a lie? I have a feeling," she finally said. "Sometimes when you least expect it, life gives you an opportunity. And I think our opportunity has just arrived." Sophia smiled, that innocent and hopeful smile that Elena feared the world would take away from her too soon. "That would be great, Mom. Maybe we could go to the amusement park this weekend, like you promised me a long time ago." Elena felt a lump in her throat. She remembered that promise, made months ago when Sophia had gotten excellent grades. a promise she hadn't been able to keep because the money barely covered the essentials. "Of course, honey," she said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "This weekend we'll go to the amusement park. I promise." Sophia's eyes lit up with excitement. "Really? Great. I can't wait to tell my friends at school tomorrow." "Now off to bed," Elena said, standing up and guiding Sophia out of the room. "You have school tomorrow, and you need to rest." After tucking Sophia in and saying goodnight, Elena returned to her bedroom. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closet where she had hidden the suitcase. The weight of what she had done was beginning to settle in her conscience. She had crossed a line. She had made a decision that had no turning back. But at the same time, for the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope. With that suitcase, she could pay off all the debts. She could give Sophia the life she deserved. They could move to a better neighborhood, to a better school. She could leave that exhausting job at the factory and maybe even go back to studying as she had always dreamed. But at what cost? Elena stood up and walked to the closet. With trembling hands, she moved aside the clothes and blankets, revealing the black suitcase. She opened it once more, almost hoping that it had all been a dream and that it would be empty. But no, the money was still there. Bundles and bundles of bills, more than she had ever seen in her life. Elena took one of the bundles and counted it quickly. $10,000 in a single bundle. And there were dozens of identical bundles in the suitcase. "Oh my God," she whispered. "What have I gotten myself into?" The magnitude of what she had done hit her suddenly. This wasn't a little money found on the street. This was a fortune. The kind of money people killed for. Fear began to grow in her chest. What if someone had seen her take the suitcase? What if the police started asking questions? What if the real owners of the money found her? Elena slammed the suitcase shut and hid it again, as if by hiding it she could also hide her fears and doubts. She lay down on the bed, but sleep wouldn't come. Her mind kept racing, imagining increasingly terrible scenarios. She saw armed men bursting into her apartment, police taking her away in handcuffs in front of a crying Sophia, herself in a prison cell far from her daughter. But then other thoughts began to emerge. Thoughts of a better future, of a life without financial worries. She imagined Sophia graduating from college, something that until a few hours ago had seemed an impossible dream. She saw herself rested, smiling, without the constant weight of poverty on her shoulders. "I just have to be careful," she told herself. "I can't spend it all at once. I have to make it look natural, as if things are just gradually getting better." With that thought, Elena began to devise a plan in her mind. She would use the money little by little, first paying off the most urgent debts. Then, gradually, she would improve their situation. A better apartment in a few months, maybe new clothes for Sophia. Perhaps she could even reduce her hours at the factory, saying she had found a better-paying job elsewhere. The clock on her bedside table read 2:30 a.m. when fatigue finally overcame her. Elena sank into a restless sleep, populated by chasing shadows and suitcases full of bills that turned into snakes. Morning came too soon. The harsh sound of the alarm clock tore Elena from her nightmares, leaving her disoriented for a moment. For an instant, she believed it had all been a dream, but one look at the closet brought reality crashing back. Elena got up with difficulty, feeling as if she hadn't slept at all. She headed to the kitchen to prepare Sophia's breakfast, trying to act normally. "Good morning, Mom," Sophia said, entering the kitchen with her backpack over her shoulder. "Are you okay? You look tired." Elena forced a smile. "I'm fine, honey. I just stayed up late reviewing some things for work." While Sophia ate breakfast, Elena couldn't stop thinking about the suitcase hidden in her closet. Every sound in the hallway startled her. Every look from her daughter made her wonder if she could see the guilt in her eyes. "Mom," Sophia said suddenly, pulling Elena from her thoughts. "Is it true what you said last night? Are we really going to the amusement park this weekend?" Elena felt a lump in her throat. For a moment, she had forgotten the promise she had made the night before. a promise made in a moment of euphoria and guilt. "Of course, my love," she responded, trying to sound enthusiastic. "This Saturday we'll go." "How does that sound?" Sophia's eyes lit up with joy. "Great. Can I invite my friend Lucia?" Elena hesitated for a moment. Every additional expense meant using more of the suitcase money, increasing the risk of being discovered. But her daughter's hopeful smile melted her doubts. "Of course," she finally said. "Tell Lucia she can come with us." After seeing Sophia off to school, Elena was left alone in the apartment. The silence seemed to amplify the weight of her secret. She walked slowly to her bedroom, staring at the closet door. With trembling hands, she opened the closet and took out the suitcase. She placed it on the bed and opened it once more, as if she needed to confirm that it was all still there, that it hadn't been a dream. The bundles of bills stared back at her, tempting and terrifying at the same time. Elena took one of the bundles and began to count. $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. When she finished counting, she was left breathless. There was over $500,000 in that suitcase. "Oh my God," she whispered, collapsing onto the bed. This is too much." The magnitude of what she had found overwhelmed her. This wasn't the kind of money someone just forgot in an alley. This was the kind of money people killed for. Elena began to panic. What if someone had seen her take the suitcase? What if they were looking for her right now? Images of dangerous men bursting into her apartment filled her mind. She jumped up and ran to the window, nervously looking out at the street. Everything seemed normal. Neighbors going to work, children walking to school, the garbage truck making its usual rounds. Nothing out of the ordinary, but still, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She returned to the bed and began to put the money back in the suitcase with trembling hands. She had to hide it better. The closet wasn't enough. She looked around the room, searching for a safer hiding place. Her eyes fell on the old mattress. With a sudden burst of decision, Elena lifted the mattress and began to tear open the bottom with a kitchen knife. She worked frantically, creating a hole large enough for the suitcase. When she finished, she stuffed the suitcase into the hole and sewed it back up as best she could. It wasn't a perfect job, but it would do. After making the bed, Elena sat on the edge, breathing heavily. The initial panic had subsided, replaced by a cold determination. "I can do this," she told herself. "I just have to be careful. Use the money little by little. No one has to know." With that resolution in mind, Elena got up and prepared to go to work. She had to keep up appearances, act as if nothing had changed, at least for now. As she walked to the factory, Elena couldn't help but look over her shoulder, imagining accusing eyes in every face that passed. The weight of her secret seemed to grow with each step. Upon arriving at the factory, she was greeted by the familiar noise of the machines and the smell of fabric and chemicals. For a moment, the routine calmed her. Here, among the hum of sewing machines and the chatter of her co-workers, she could pretend everything was. "Elena," called Marta, her co-worker at the next machine over. "Are you okay? You look pale." Elena forced a smile. "I'm fine, just a bit tired. Didn't sleep well last night." Marta looked at her with concern. "Problems with Sophia?" No, Elena replied quickly. "Just, everyday worries." Marta nodded sympathetically. "I understand. This life isn't easy. But hey, at least we have a job, right?" Elena felt a pang of guilt. Here was Marta, grateful for a poorly paid and exhausting job, while she was hiding a fortune at home. The day passed slowly. Elena worked mechanically, her mind divided between worry about the hidden money and plans to use it. Every time the foreman passed by, she felt her heart race, as if somehow he could read her secret on her face. During lunch, Elena sat alone in a corner of the factory cafeteria. She took out her phone and began searching for information on how to spend large amounts of money without raising suspicions. Each article she read made her feel more paranoid. Money laundering, tax evasion, suspicious transactions. Terms she had never considered before now filled her mind. "What are you reading that has you so concentrated?" a voice suddenly asked behind her. Elena nearly jumped out of her seat, quickly closing the web page. It was Luisa, another of her coworkers. "Nothing important," Elena said, trying to sound casual. "Just looking for ideas for Sophia's birthday." Luisa smiled. "Ah, kids grow up so fast. How old is she turning?" 13, Elena replied, grateful for the change of subject. "She's already entering adolescence." "My God, 13 already," Luisa exclaimed. "It seems like just yesterday you were bringing her to the factory daycare." "Time flies." Elena nodded, suddenly feeling nostalgic. How many years had she spent in this factory, struggling to give Sophia a better life? How many opportunities had been lost due to lack of money? And now suddenly she had the means to change all that. But at what cost, she wondered. Was the risk worth it? The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity and conflicting thoughts. When the bell finally rang marking the end of the shift, Elena felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. On one hand, she was eager to get home and make sure everything was all right. On the other, she feared what she might find. As she walked back home, Elena made a decision. She would use a small part of the money to pay off overdue bills and buy some necessities for Sophia. Then she would wait. If no one came looking for the money in a few weeks, then maybe, just maybe, she could consider using it for something bigger. Upon reaching her building, Elena climbed the stairs with her heart in her throat. Every creak, every shadow made her startle. When she finally reached her door, she paused, listening. Everything seemed normal. She entered the apartment, and the first thing she did was run to her bedroom. With trembling hands, she lifted the mattress and checked that the suitcase was still there, untouched. She let out a sigh of relief. Everything was fine. For now, she sat on the bed, staring blankly at the wall. The sound of the door opening snapped her out of her thoughts. "Mom, I'm home," Sophia shouted from the living room. Elena quickly got up, forcing a smile on her face. "I'm in my room, honey. How was school?" As she listened to her daughter talk excitedly about her day and her plans for the weekend at the amusement park, Elena felt a mixture of love, guilt, and determination. "Everything will be all right," she told herself. "I'll make all of this worth it. For Sophia." But in the back of her mind, a persistent voice whispered that nothing would ever be the same again. That with every bill she spent, with every lie she told, she would be venturing further and further into a world from which she might not be able to escape. Night fell over the city, and with it the weight of Elena's decisions. As she prepared dinner for Sophia, she couldn't stop thinking about the suitcase hidden under her mattress. It was as if its presence filled the entire apartment, a secret too big to ignore. "Mom, are you sure you're okay?" Sophia asked during dinner, looking at her mother with concern. "You've been very quiet." Elena blinked, coming out of her thoughts. "I'm fine, honey. Just a bit tired from work. But hey, what do you think if this weekend, besides the amusement park, we go shopping? I think you need some new clothes for school." Sophia's eyes lit up. "Really? That would be great. But can we afford it?" The innocent question from her daughter was like a knife to Elena's heart. How many times had she had to say no to Sophia due to lack of money? How many times had she seen disappointment in her eyes? "Yes, we can," Elena said with a forced smile. Things are getting better at work. I think it's time we treat ourselves a little." Sophia jumped from her chair and hugged her mother. "Thank you, Mom. You're the best." As she hugged her daughter, Elena felt a mixture of love and guilt that threatened to choke her. Was she doing the right thing? Or was she dragging Sophia into a world of lies and danger? That night, after Sophia had gone to bed, Elena took the suitcase out of its hiding place. She carefully counted out $2,000 and put it in her purse. It was enough to pay off overdue bills, buy new clothes for Sophia, and cover the expenses for the weekend at the amusement park. As she hid the suitcase again, Elena made a promise to herself. She would use this money to give Sophia the life she deserved. But she would be careful. No one should suspect. No one should know. What Elena didn't know was that her decision that night was about to trigger a series of events that would change her life forever. The money she had found had a history, a dark and dangerous history that would soon come knocking at her door. As she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling in the dark, Elena couldn't imagine that somewhere in the city, someone was already looking for that suitcase. Someone who would stop at nothing to recover what they considered theirs. Elena and Sophia's fate hung by a thread woven with stolen bills and dangerous secrets. And with each passing day, that thread was getting tighter and tighter, dangerously approaching the breaking point. The days following the discovery of the suitcase passed in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions for Elena. On one hand, she experienced an almost intoxicating euphoria every time she thought about the possibilities that money represented. On the other, she lived in a constant state of paranoia, imagining that every shadow on the street was someone coming to claim the money, that every glance from her neighbors hid suspicion about her sudden good fortune. The weekend at the amusement park with Sophia and her friend Lucia was a highlight. Seeing the genuine smile on her daughter's face as she got on the rides, eating cotton candy without worrying about the extra expense, buying souvenirs without having to make desperate mental calculations. All of this made Elena feel for the first time in years that she was fulfilling her role as a mother as she should. "Mom, this has been the best day of my life," Sophia exclaimed as they returned home, her arms loaded with stuffed animals won in the games. Elena smiled, though she felt a pang of guilt. "I'm glad, honey. You deserve it." Lucia, Sophia's friend, nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, Mrs. Elena, it's been amazing. I wish we could do this more often." "Maybe we can," Elena responded, surprising herself with her words. "Things are getting better at work." The lie came from her lips with an ease that scared her. When had it become so easy to deceive? Days turned into weeks, and Elena began to use the suitcase money more frequently. First came the basic necessities, paying off overdue bills, buying better quality food, fixing broken things in the apartment. Then came the small luxuries, new clothes for Sophia, a bigger television, a computer so her daughter could do her homework at home. Each expense was carefully planned, each purchase justified with an elaborate story about overtime or bonuses at work. Elena was surprised at her own ability to create believable lies, to weave a web of deceptions that explained her sudden prosperity. One night, as they were having dinner, Sophia looked at her mother curiously. "Mom, where did you get the money for all this? Did they raise your salary at the factory?" Elena felt her heart stop for a moment. She had feared this question, but still wasn't prepared to face it. Well, honey, it's complicated," she began, avoiding her daughter's inquisitive gaze. "I've been working very hard, taking extra shifts, and they've given me a raise." The words came out hurriedly, each one building a bigger lie. Elena hated herself for deceiving her daughter, but the fear of losing everything was stronger. Sophia looked at her for a moment, as if evaluating the truth of her words. Then, to Elena's relief, she smiled. "That's great, Mom. You deserve it for all you've worked." Elena's relief was short-lived. That night, while Sophia slept, Elena sat in front of the TV, absently changing channels. Suddenly, a news item caught her attention. Police continue to investigate the $1 million robbery at the central bank. It is suspected that the stolen money could be circulating in the city. Elena felt the ground open up beneath her feet. Couldn't be. It didn't have to be a coincidence. But doubt had already been sown in her mind. The following days were torture. Every time she heard a police car, every time she heard a siren, Elena felt her heart stop. She began to have nightmares in which armed men burst into her apartment, taking Sophia away while she screamed helplessly. Fear led her to be more cautious with her spending. She stored most of the money in a safe deposit box she rented at a bank using a false name. She only kept small amounts at home, hidden in different places around the apartment. But the temptation of money was strong. Elena began to dream of a better life, not just for Sophia, but for herself too. What if she left the factory? What if they moved to an even better neighborhood? What if she could go back to studying as she had always dreamed? One day, while walking down the street, she saw an advertisement for a local university. "It's never too late to fulfill your dreams," the poster said. Elena stopped, staring at the image of smiling students. That night, after putting Sophia to bed, Elena sat in front of her computer. With trembling hands, she began to search for information about university programs. She found one that caught her attention, a degree in business administration. The cost was high, but with the suitcase money, she could afford it without problems. "I could do it," she told herself. "I could give Sophia a better future. I could be an example for her." But as she filled out the online application form, a voice in her head kept repeating that she was building her future on a lie, on money that didn't belong to her. Days passed, and Elena found herself increasingly trapped in her web of lies. At work, she invented stories about a second job to justify her sudden prosperity. To her neighbors, she talked about an unexpected inheritance from a distant uncle. To Sophia, she kept saying that things at the factory were getting better and better. Each lie felt like another weight on her shoulders, but Elena saw no other way out. She had gone too far to turn back. One afternoon, as Elena prepared dinner, Sophia entered the kitchen with a serious expression on her face. "Mom, can we talk?" she asked, sitting at the kitchen table. Elena felt a knot in her stomach. "Of course, honey. What's wrong?" Sophia hesitated for a moment before speaking. "It's just that some things don't make sense. You say things are better at work, but you still come home at the same time. We have more money, but I never see you working overtime. And the other day when I went to the factory to bring you the lunch you forgot, your boss told me you hadn't come to work that day." Elena felt the world stop. Her mind worked frantically, searching for an explanation, another lie that could satisfy her daughter's curiosity. "Sophia, she began, but the words got stuck in her throat. "Mom, what's really going on?" Sophia asked, her eyes full of worry and confusion. "Are you in trouble? Is there something you're not telling me?" Elena looked at her daughter, her heart torn between the desire to protect her and the need to be honest. How could she explain? How could she justify the lies, the money, the risk she had taken? "Honey, things are complicated," Elena finally said, sitting next to her daughter. "Sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions. Decisions we can't always explain." Sophia stared at her. "Are you doing something illegal, Mom?" The question hit Elena like a punch to the stomach. Had she been so transparent? Were her lies so obvious that even her 13-year-old daughter could see through them? No, of course not," Elena responded quickly. But even she could hear the lack of conviction in her voice. "It's just that things have changed. I've had some opportunities that I can't fully explain right now. But I promise you that everything I do for you, for our future." Sophia didn't seem convinced, but she nodded slowly. "Okay, Mom, I trust you. But please don't lie to me. If something's wrong, I want to know. We're a team, remember?" Her daughter's words were like a dagger to Elena's heart. Yes, they were a team. They always had been. How had she allowed money, greed, fear to come between them? "You're right, my love," Elena said, hugging her daughter. "We are a team, and I promise that soon I'll explain everything to you. I just need a little more time." That night, after Sophia had gone to bed, Elena sat in the living room, staring blankly at the turned-off television. The reflection that the screen returned to her was that of a tired, frightened woman, trapped in a situation that had gotten out of hand. How had she gotten to this point? How had she allowed a decision made in a moment of desperation to turn into this snowball of lies and deceptions? Elena knew she had to do something. She couldn't keep living like this, lying to everyone, especially Sophia. But what could she do? Return the money? Confess? Run away? As she considered her options, A noise in the hallway startled her. Elena jumped up, her heart pounding. Had they come for her? The police? The real owners of the money? With trembling steps, she approached the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Elena let out a sigh of relief, but the fear persisted. How much longer could she live like this, jumping at every shadow, fearing that at any moment everything would crumble? That night, Elena made a decision. She had to find a way out of this situation. For Sofia, for herself, for the life they had had before, a life that, although difficult, was at least honest. But as she prepared for bed, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late, that the decisions she had made, the lies she had told, had set in motion a series of events that she could no longer control. And somewhere in the city, unbeknownst to Elena, someone was closing in. Someone who wouldn't stop until they recovered what they considered theirs, no matter the cost. The truth behind the money was about to come to light, and when it did, it would threaten to destroy everything Elena had tried to build. Dawn found Elena awake, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and desperate plans. The conversation with Sofia the night before had been a turning point. She could no longer continue living this lie. But how to get out of it without losing everything? With mechanical movements, she got up and began her daily routine. She prepared breakfast for Sofia, saw her off to school, and then headed to the factory. But today something was different. Every step she took towards her workplace felt like a step towards her doom. Upon arriving at the factory, Elena noticed something unusual. There was a black car parked in front of the entrance, a vehicle she had never seen there before. Two men in dark suits were standing next to the car, their eyes scanning the workers entering. Elena's heart began to pound. Had they come for her? Did they know something? With trembling legs, Elena entered the factory. She had barely reached her workstation when her supervisor approached her. "Elena, the boss wants to see you in his office. Now," he said, with a serious tone that sent a chill down her spine. With each step towards the boss's office, Elena felt she was approaching her final judgment. When she entered, she found not only her boss but also the two men she had seen outside. "Elena Gomez," said one of the men, showing a badge. "I'm Detective Ramirez. We have some questions for you." Elena felt the ground open up beneath her feet. This was the moment she had feared since she found the suitcase.